thank the panel, but I also want to thank our four lead questioners today. I think they have raised some very fundamental issues in a way that will be very helpful to us as we move towards our final recommendations. We are now going to move into the 5-minute questioning period, and I have the good fortune of being the first of those. I'd like to turn in my first 5 minutes to issues of personnel. My own experience has been that you can have the best organizational chart, but if you don't have the people who can make the system work, you're not likely to be very successful. Parenthetically, I hope Steve Spurrier is not in that position this year. Mr. Hitz, you talked about a number of things that might be done to enhance the personnel within the intelligence agency, starting with the idea of more internships to introduce young people to. There have been a series of other suggestions made, which I'd just like to mention for purposes of maybe stimulating your brief comments on those and then adding to your list of ideas. There was a proposal in an issue of Foreign Affairs earlier this year of setting up an intelligence reserve corps, somewhat analogous to the military reserves, which could be activated at a time of particular need. Proposal for an intelligence reserve officer training corps. Maybe that comes close to your suggestion that you just made about restoring the scholarships, the defense scholarships that used to be made. Also the issue in terms of getting more people in intelligence who can speak the languages and understand the cultures of the diverse areas of the world in which we're now trying to operate, that we ought to have a more aggressive recruitment policy towards non-traditional CIA and other intelligence agents, specifically among the Arab American population. Could you comment on those and any other suggestions to improve the personnel quality? Let me just mention one other that I heard on a recent visit to our station in Cairo, and that was that, and almost like in the public schools, the agents' compensation is heavily affected by their years in service, and once they reach a certain level, it's hard to show much more advancement. And at that point, agents are tempted to leave their case responsibilities and move into an administrative position where they have a more economic upside, just as teachers tend to leave the classroom and go into administration for the same reason. Is there some way that we ought to be relooking at the compensation strategy for intelligence agencies to keep our best people doing what they're best at and being rewarded for that superior service?
There are a lot of good points that you've made, Mr. Chairman, and also ways in which I think aspects of them have been tried in the past but not pushed enough. I think the Intelligence Reserve Corps has been attempted after a fashion, and I think you would agree with me, sir, that presently, with deficiencies in a number of language skills and experience levels, a lot of old boys have been brought back. They're in effect an Intelligence Reserve Corps right now. They've gotten recent retirees to agree to come back and put their shoulder to the wheel after 9/11. That's an informal way of getting at that, but it certainly makes some sense. On the question of trying to recruit operatives from America's Arab American community to go back to the Middle East, I thought it was a very thoughtful unsigned editorial in the Washington Times a day or so ago, making the point that that's not necessarily the answer to a problem, because natives of that region want to be dealt with by a real American, so to speak. I'm putting that in quotation marks. That they want somebody that may not speak the language with absolute proficiency, but is good enough. And a perfect example of that is the Popov case in the Cold War era, when the agency sent a recent emigre from the Soviet Union to first deal with Popov when he was coming over to us from Vienna, and Popov didn't trust him. He knew what Stalin was able to do with emigres and wouldn't fiddle with it. So I think there has to be sort of a balance on that part. On the management side, as opposed to why promote a person who's a first-rate case officer into management and lose those talents. And again, that's a debate that's gone on long in the intelligence community, and lots of people, frankly, as case officers don't want to be and aren't very good as managers. I think George Kiesewetter, I don't think I'm taking his name in vain, always considered himself to be a case officer till the day he died, even though he was a very senior intelligence officer. But I want to be clear on the point. I don't think all of the talent for doing this work is going to come out necessarily of our finest universities. There are all kinds of skills that work in this area. And if I can be permitted just a personal anecdote to finish up with, my first boss in the agency was a Nisei. He was a person who lived long enough ago in Los Angeles to be able to dive for abalone in Los Angeles Harbor. It's been a long time since that happened. Well, he was sent to camp. His family were interned. And in 1942, the U.S. Army came along and recruited him to the Counterintelligence Corps. He served in Japan until the end of the war, joined CIA for 30 years, practicing his trade all over the world. Extraordinary person. Why there was no lingering bitterness, I have no idea. But he was absolutely first rate. So this country has got an awful lot of broad range of talents out there to draw from.
Thank you, Mr. Hitz. I'm sorry that my time has expired, but when I rotate back, I'd like to ask Mr. Hamilton and General Odom for their comments on the issue of personnel.